Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing really well. Today I'm going to be that cliched booktuber who says, I can't believe September is over, oh my god, it's October, it's basically Christmas. Honestly, all of these things are true in my brain. But you know what? I'm happy about it. 2020 has been a grim year. Autumn and the lead up to Christmas is my favourite time of the year anyway, so I am super happy that we're here. So in September I read a couple of Booker longlisted and shortlisted books. I read some YA fantasy, an adult novel told in verse, and a couple of brand new poetry collections. All very exciting stuff, and we even have a 5-star book in here. So settle in, grab yourself a hot drink, and let's get into the books. First up, in September, I read Raybearer by Jordan Ifweko. This is a new YA fantasy novel that I was kindly sent a proof of by the publisher. It is the first in a duology, I believe. It follows the story of a young girl called Tarasai who is one day sent off to the Empire's capital by her absent mother, commonly known as the Lady, to compete with other children to be one of the Crown Prince's Council of 11. Being part of the council means being connected to your council siblings by the Ray, which is a bond deeper than blood. But there is one catch. Once Tarasai has gained the Crown Prince's trust, the Lady has instructed her to kill him. So I really enjoyed this book. It was so good. The setup here is very inventive, very intriguing. I love this idea of the council being made up of different people from each of the different realms and them all being connected together so deeply. We do have magic in here. We have wishes and djinns. The book explores themes of love and betrayal, and there's tons of peril and drama. The characters are all really great as well. I particularly enjoyed following Tarasai's journey as she struggles with love and acceptance at the same time as obligation and destiny. She goes through some stuff and she has to remain so strong and determined. It was great to see. I also love the side characters. Tarasai's council siblings were adorable. The world is a strength in here as well. It is very unique and beautiful and very well thought through. I loved learning about the Empire and the different kingdoms within it. They all seem to have very rich histories. If anything, I actually wanted to learn more about these kingdoms. The world in here is so great and there seemed to be so much more that we could have explored. Hoping to get more of that in the second book. I will also add that this book kind of lost me a little bit in the second half. The first half for me was perfect, amazing, loved it. Unfortunately, the second half didn't feel quite as strong to me. It didn't feel quite as confident or focused. But overall, this is a great fantasy book. It felt very fresh, totally enjoyable. Jordan Ifweko is fab, and I very much look forward to the next book coming out. In the end, I gave Raybearer 4.5 stars. Next, in September, I picked up Here is the Beehive by Sarah Crossan. This is another new book that I was kindly sent by the publisher. It is an adult novel and it is told completely in verse. It follows a female lawyer named Anna who has been involved in a secret affair with Connor for 3 years when Connor suddenly dies. Anna then forms a friendship with Connor's wife and the story goes on from there. So this is the first full novel in verse I have ever read, I believe. And I really liked the structuring. It worked for me. It created a really great reading experience that was very unique and very fast-paced. I also found it to be very effective at putting across the protagonist's emotions. My guess is that this is because this kind of read like poetry to me, and I typically find poetry to be a very effective and emotional medium. What I didn't love about this novel, unfortunately, was its protagonist. She is not likable at all, really, and while this is not necessarily an issue, I also didn't really find her to be that interesting. I didn't really relate to her. I didn't really feel as though I learned much from from her or really got any special insight from her. So I kind of have mixed feelings about this one. I kind of enjoyed it as a whole. I liked the way it was put together. I found it to be quite enjoyable and affecting. But I didn't really care about the central story too much, which is obviously an issue. This all being said, I do think Sarah Crossan is clearly a very talented writer. I would definitely be keen to read more by her in the future. I personally just didn't really connect to this one, so in the end I gave it 3 stars. Next, in September, I picked up The Family Tree by Sayrish Hussein. Man, I loved this book. Before we get into this, I just want to say a big thank you to Lisa Milton over at HQ, who sent me a lovely box of books. It was the loveliest treat ever, and I will be eternally grateful for you for introducing me to this book. This is a chunky, epic, family-focused novel following a British Muslim family from the 1990s to present day. We follow Amjad, the father, when he is left with 2 young children when his beloved wife passes away. Years later, we follow Sahil and his best friend, who have just finished university, when a celebratory night out turns dangerous and results in terrible consequences. And we also follow Zara, who is trying to look after her father and bring her family back together while also figuring out her own path. This is just the most beautiful emotional story. It is one of the most emotional reading experiences I have had in a very long time. I cried 2, maybe 3 times, which is pretty unusual for me. This book has everything. It has a plot that is engaging and suspenseful and breathtaking. It is set in contemporary England so perfectly. Everything about this, from the setting to conversations between father and daughter and uni student to uni student, just felt so believable. This book is England today. The book speaks to family and forgiveness and politics and feminism in both the most tender and also unapologetic way. And we also just have the most wonderful, well-drawn, totally real feeling characters. Zara in particular is such a cool character. She is so strong and compassionate. She's trying to look after everybody around her at the same time as figuring out her own stuff, her own personal politics and activism. I grew to care for all of these characters so much, and witnessing the reverberations that come from this tragedy that occurs and seeing all of the ways in which it impacted all of the characters was just heartbreaking. I can't praise this novel more highly. It just has the perfect amount of everything to create the best, most well-rounded, impactful story. It was such a ride reading this. I loved every single page. And this is a debut novel as well. I am so excited to see what Sayrish Hussein does next. Sign me up now. More people need to read this book. You will love it. And of course, I gave it 5 stars. Next up in September, I read a proof copy of an exciting new poetry collection that is coming out on the 15th of October. The Gaze by Ni Ayikwe Parks. This collection explores so many different facets of life. It is split into 4 sections and it looks at themes of love and play, heritage, gossip, pop culture, and the self. People Tree Press is a really cool publisher that houses Caribbean and Black British poetry, fiction, memoirs, and more. Ni Ayikwe Parks himself was raised in Ghana. He is a poet and publisher and performer, and he's clearly a very talented man. I found this poetry collection to be very impressive and enjoyable. I loved all of the themes explored in here. The collection felt very raw and emotional and powerful to me. Some of the poems in here focus in on the poet's own personal experiences regarding his family and his romantic relationships. Other poems speak to much wider issues, which do of course affect the individual, and I just love this kind of zooming in and out and feeling so emotionally affected by both. The language in here is gorgeous. There are some lines that just have the most delicious imagery. The love poems in here were particular favorites of mine, and I'm actually just going to read you a couple of lines of one because I love it so much. That is how it comes to be that I witness the darkness, relaxing its hold on our bodies, yielding us to form. First shadowed angles, the buried tip of your left breast, quick to sip warmth from the light. I could eat those words. Of course, there were some poems in here that I didn't relate to as much as others, but that is to be expected. Overall, I really enjoyed this collection and I would highly recommend it. I will definitely be reading more by Ni Ayikwe Parks in the future. In the end, I gave The Gaze 4 stars. Next, I picked up a Booker Prize longlisted book, and that was Redhead by the Side of the Road by Anne Tyler. This follows a middle-aged man named Micah who likes to live his life by his very predictable routine when one day his girlfriend rings him up and says she is being evicted from her apartment and that she needs somewhere to live, and then a teenage boy also shows up on Micah's doorstep claiming to be his son. So Anne Tyler is just such a classy writer. I have adored her for years. I have read a few of her novels now, and she is just such an accomplished novelist. She has such a skill at turning the everyday, the average person, the mundane into something interesting and insightful. This book was no exception. It is about a pretty boring man living his pretty boring life, but somehow everything just comes to life through her prose. One of my favorite things about Anne Tyler's writing is that some sentences just feel as though they are written for you. They are so truthful about such everyday experiences, and sometimes they just hit the nail on the head and you're like, oh my god, other people do that too. I do have to say that this wasn't my favourite Anne Tyler. It was undeniably brilliantly written, but I didn't love it as much as I have loved some others. I didn't really care for the characters. I wasn't particularly invested in Micah's story. I know that isn't really the point in here, but it has to be said. So for this one, I'd say if you are a fan of Anne Tyler and you know what she's about, then this is definitely worth a read. If you haven't read any Anne Tyler yet and you're wanting to give her a go, then I would definitely recommend A Spool of Blue Thread or Clock Dance first. So in the end, I gave Redhead by the Side of the Road 3 stars. Next, I picked up The Shadow King by Marza Mengistu. This is currently on the Booker shortlist. It's my 3rd Booker shortlisted novel, and unfortunately this one wasn't for me. Set during Mussolini's 1935 invasion of Ethiopia, this novel primarily follows the story of a woman named Hiru, as well as more generally the women soldiers at the time of this conflict. So there was definitely good stuff about this book. I was very excited when I started it. I was intrigued by Hiru straight away. I thought her character was very well set up. I loved the setting. I was very interested in this time period, in this place, so I was excited to learn. And the writing is pretty strong as well. From the beginning, it is very apparent that Marza Mengistu can write. But there were just some issues I had with this book that stopped me being fully in it and ultimately getting much from it. Firstly, the pacing in this book is not well done in my humble opinion. Honestly, this book should just have been edited down more. It did not need to be 550 pages long. There were some sections, particularly in the first half, that were so long and slow, and they just stopped any sense of intrigue building up for me. Generally, I found it quite difficult to stay present in this novel and to fully feel like I knew what was going on. There were what felt like a lot of different characters and a lot of different story threads to follow throughout. We switch our perspective quite often. I don't know if anyone else found it pretty confusing to follow. Now, to be fair, I did listen to this book via audiobook, and I'm beginning to think that it may not have been the best medium through which to consume this story. But also, as an overall comment, I just wanted more of the women in here. Like The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker, actually, this is marketed as being about the women and exploring the women's experiences in this time of conflict. But it wasn't totally about the women, and because of this, I kind of resented the sections that were talking about the men, and I actually thought the sections about the women were better better and more interesting and more engaging. So unfortunately, this book just didn't really work for me. Perhaps I would have connected to it better if I had read a physical copy rather than listening to it on audiobook. But either way, there were just some things in here that I didn't think worked too well, despite the brilliant idea and the clear talent on the part of the author. So in the end, I gave The Shadow King 2.5 stars. The penultimate book that I read in September was Just Like You by Nick Hornby. This is a new literary fiction novel that I was kindly sent by the publisher. Set in North London, it explores the relationship between Lucy, a 40-something white woman who has 2 young kids, and Joseph, a 20-something black man who is babysitting said kids. So I really enjoyed this book. I flew through it. It was probably one of the quickest, most simply enjoyable reads I have had in a while. And also, how gorgeous is this cover? They are marketing this book so well. I really enjoyed following both of the central characters in here. The structuring of the book kind of moves around. We get to focus in on different characters at different times, and I really liked this. I felt that it allowed a really good insight into different people's different lives. I really liked both of the characters. I could understand all of their struggles and their wants and desires, and I was definitely hooked by their story. I wanted to know what would happen between them. I also really enjoyed how firmly rooted this book felt in today. It explores the topic of Brexit quite prominently, which wasn't something I was aware of or expected, but I really enjoyed it. It felt quite natural in the story, and it was really great to witness lots of different perspectives, sometimes subtly different perspectives throughout. Nick Hornby is actually quite a famous author. I have never read anything by him before, but I'm pretty sure he has written like a ton of books. I could see this from reading the book. The writing was very confident and it was very well done. The pacing was very good as well. I don't know if this was mainly due to the author's work or the editor's work, but either way, it all came together to create a very good, well-paced package, I would say. So overall, I really enjoyed this. I found it to be a very fun read with very good writing and very good characters and very good themes. If it strikes your fancy, I'd definitely recommend giving it a go, and in the end, I gave it 4 stars. Finally, in September, I read another new poetry collection that I was kindly sent by the publisher, and that was Runaway by Jory Graham. This collection explores what our future may look like in light of things such as climate change and social disruption, and it explores what will survive. What is love? What is identity? What is it to be human? And how can we hold on to this? Jory Graham is an incredibly established poet. She has written many, many collections. She won the Pulitzer Prize for poetry, and you can definitely tell. This poetry collection is accomplished and beautiful and perceptive and technical. The Times Literary Supplement blurbs this on the back and says, "We should be grateful to Jory Graham for her own heroics of perception, even if they show up our ordinary insight." And that is so accurate. That is how I felt. I read this collection in awe. I read this collection fully realizing that Jory Graham was conceptualizing and exploring things that were going way over my head. And I was okay with this because I still did manage to gain a lot from this collection, even though I was so aware that there was a lot more to be gained. I loved the themes explored in here. I was totally hooked. The idea of exploring what our future holds is fascinating and terrifying. The collection feels very philosophical, which is right up my street. It explores human nature quite prominently, which I love musing about. The poems in here are very striking. We have quite a lot of strange and shocking imagery. The way Jory Graham uses language is gorgeous. It has you rereading and reading aloud and questioning. This is just a very good collection of poetry if you haven't got that already. If you are a big contemporary poetry reader and you're interested in these themes, you must give this a go. Jory Graham is a talent. If you haven't read a ton of contemporary poetry before, then I can't say that this would be the best place to start, I don't think, but definitely keep it in mind because it is stunning and so great. So in the end, I gave Runaway 4.5 stars. So there we have all of the books that I read in September. Quite a fun mix, I thought. I would love to know your thoughts on any of these books if you've read them, or do any of them strike your fancy. Also, please let me know what you've been reading in September. Tell me about the worst and the best. I would love to know. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I appreciate you all. I hope you're well. I hope you're settling into autumn, and I will see you soon with another video. Bye.